2023 has come to an end, which means it's time for the year-honored tradition of Spilly K's Top 10 Games of the Year. Now, before we get into the top 10, I wanted to list a couple of honorable mentions. These are games that didn't come out this year, but if they did, they'd be up top. First of these is Pillars of Eternity by Obsidian Entertainment, which is probably my favorite game I've played this year. I really can't stop thinking about it. Anyone that knows me knows I won't really shut up about it. And it all started because after finishing Baldurs Gate 3, I had this insatiable urge for more CRPG goodness. This was a genre that I beforehand was never really even into, right? I liked your Western RPGs, like your Bethesda games and your Square Enix RPGs, like Final Fantasy and such, but the CRPG always eluded me. I think a big problem with this was I always tried to play with controller. Bad idea. Mouse and keyboard's the way to go for this. Controlling your party's much easier, and Pillars of Eternity is a game that I think its praises should be sung more often. I didn't think there would be an RPG that topped Baldur's Gate this year, but God, if this isn't the most fun I've had ever delving into a fantasy world. The writing is just bar none. The characters are so believable. Forming your party of adventurers, I've never had a feeling quite like the Fellowship in Fellowship of the Ring when I first read that, and this game really just matched that level, right? The real-time with pause combat was something that I never thought I would really get into, but I like it more than turn-based systems. It really is so much fun to dive into this world and, go dungeon delving and have a good time with your buds. Now, the final game on my honorable mentions is a little title called Hollow Knight. This is an indie darling that if you're familiar with the space, there's really not much more that needs to be said. But for me, I kept falling off of this game for some reason. I don't know why. I've been trying to play it for years, and there was something about the design and the character movement that didn't click with me until this year, where I just got so obsessed and lost in this world in a way where I truly felt like I was constantly in conversation with the game designers, which I think is the highest praise I could ever give any game. Just because when those systems fall apart and you are just truly in conversation is when the magic happens. From the beautiful, very depressing, yet there's this lonely hope in the world that just is so inviting, especially with the fantastic musical score, specifically in the City of Tears, and then excellent boss fights and a combat loop that really just keeps you wanting more, which I don't know why I fell off of it, but that's the honorable mentions. Now, number 10, Starfield. Now, this is a game that has been farly maligned, I think, a lot. The critical reception has been mostly middling, but I don't know, something just worked about this game for me. And the common criticism to a lot of Bethesda-type RPGs is that they're a mile wide and a foot deep. But also in real life, I like kayaking along lazy rivers and just taking in the sights. So I think in that way, this design kind of works for me sometimes, right? It doesn't have the systemic depth of a lot of the other RPGs that came out this year, and I think that has led people to kind of misunderstand what this does right. This isn't a game where you just pick a direction and run, which is, I think, the way people normally play these Bethesda games. It's not how I've ever played them. My favorite thing in Oblivion was walking into a town, getting to know the locals, figuring out what's going on, around the outskirts, and then setting off at someone's request. And if you follow that loop of Starfield, you kind of see what the designers were intending in a way that just worked for me. I don't think it'll work for everyone, right? The loading screens didn't really bother me because at the end of the day, I just kind of like talking to people and learning about this world. I think the reason it's number 10 and not number 1 is the world design, and specifically, I don't think it really paid off on kind of the hopes and dreams it sells at the beginning. There's a wonderful museum you can go to on the first city you get to that kind of paints this broad picture of the galaxy in a way that's incredibly exciting and engrossing. You're really excited to learn what's going on, and it never really gives you a return on that investment. But I will say the time I had, right, was a really great time going to the small colony of Cydonia on Mars and getting to know all the inner workings of how that place worked. And then there's this breadcrumb trail that actually takes you to a lot of different worlds in a way where if you're just setting off on yourself, I think you get bored. But I ended up kind of planet hopping in a way that felt really, really fun. Just a good time. Now, I don't really think Bethesda is great at like combat systems or even, character systems, but there was enough here that, I don't know, I liked getting lost in the 1-foot pond of Starfield. I had a good time doing it. I think that's all that matters at the end of the day. Number 9, Wolong Fallen Dynasty, Team Ninja's Chinese action RPG Souls-like. Now, here's the thing about Wolong. Going into this, I was so stoked, right? Sekiro-style deflection, fantastic boss design. The reason this is number 9, the back half of the game kind of falls apart, sadly. But the reason it made the top 10 was because there's a fight in Chapter 4 against Lubu. That's one of my favorite, probably my favorite boss fight of the year, one of my favorite boss fights of all time. At the moment that I was first encountering this boss, I genuinely thought this might be the greatest game I'd ever played. It was the most fun I've ever had. It took me 2 days of just battering my head against it, and for that, it deserves a spot on the list. You know, even if the latter half of the game doesn't really work for me, specifically in the way that the level design resorts to mobs of enemies and the boss encounters actually get easier and less interesting, that Lubu boss fight is enough to solidify Wolong as I think a gem, if you can kind of see through the rough patches. Number 8, Street Fighter VI, you could say is maybe the perfect fighting game. However, it wasn't the perfect fighting game for me. There's this weird je ne sais quoi with fighting games where your connection to your main character really gives you this whole embittered drive to get better in a way that no game really replicates. And in this way, I never had that connection with Street Fighter VI. Now the music, the art style, basically all of these different synergistic elements come together to make a really fantastic whole, but it never got me. I'm really happy I played a lot of it and had a good time battling against friends and on ranked, and yet it didn't reach the highs in a way that I kind of hoped it would. But also, it's an amazing game, and if you like fighting game fundamentals, you really can't go wrong with Street Fighter VI. Number 7, Cyberpunk, by most metrics, is one of the biggest disasters of any game launch in the past 2 decades. But luckily for me, I never played that Cyberpunk. You see, I knew it was a mess, and I was like, I think they're going to make it better one day. There was so much financial investment in this game that I was like, they're going to do it better. And so I messed around with it a little bit, you know, at launch, and I was like, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to wait. And I think it's going to come around at one point. Years have passed, and here we are with Phantom Liberty. And God, this game just fucking rules. Now, I'm in part putting Cyberpunk on the list not just for Phantom Liberty, but also for the rest of the game that I never experienced. Now, I don't know how the original kind of class building worked in the initial release of Cyberpunk, but I will say in 2.0, you can play the coolest street samurai ever, and I just had so much fun. The world is beautiful. The soundtrack is incredible. It is so pulsing. It mimics so wonderfully the neon lights that are cast upon your character and your cars. It's ripping through the streets. You know, the gameplay elements in this massive open world still allow for a lot of player creativity, whether it be stealth or hacking or going in guns blazing, or for me, you know, just popping Sandivis and slow-moing and just slicing up a bunch of motherfuckers. So it's a good time. And now as far as the main story goes, I think the biggest standout was like, I didn't realize like Keanu Reeves is like really good in this game. Like he crushes the role. And I'm a big Keanu fan. John Wick 4, incredible. Matrix 1, 2, 3, and 4, incredible, I think. And so just seeing him kind of eat up this role as Johnny Silverhand, I thought was just wonderful from the beginning to the end. And that's not even to mention Phantom Liberty, which is a wonderful kind of spy thriller. The intro is a bit kind of like, oh, Escape from New York, action, heavy-handed, but it actually turns into something a bit more interesting and nuanced. And I think specifically the world design of Dogtown is something that makes me incredibly excited for whatever comes next for Cyberpunk, which maybe I'll play at launch, maybe not, maybe I'll wait for it to get good, who knows. Number 6, I love Final Fantasy. I always have. One of my earliest gaming memories was being at my dad's friend's house and watching his little brother play Final Fantasy X on a tube TV on the PS2, and just at such a young age, just being absolutely mouth agape at the wonder that game instilled through its sense of scale. And Final Fantasy XVI kind of gave me that wonder a little bit again, you know, about 2 decades later. And although this game's not perfect, right, I think the combat's too easy. It never really forces you to interact with the systems, which kind of bummed me out. And I still actually haven't finished it. I need to. It's a very long game, and lots of good stuff has come out this year, but I'm about 75% of the way through it. And from what I've talked to people, I've kind of hit the highest notes. And when this game does spectacle, there's not a game on this list that reaches the highs this game reaches. Does it hit them all the time? No. But God, if it ain't wonderful. Number 5. Jusant is the best Journey since Journey. Now, if you remember Journey, you play as a little capey guy, and you You floated through the desert to get to the top of a mountain. What worked for that game so much was its synergy between its fluid motion and its world building through environmental storytelling that kind of propelled you through the beauty of its graphics and the majesty of its sound to just reach a very simple goal. Jusant does something similar, but with rock climbing, right? And I've never played a game that used, kind of climbing, puzzle solving in a way so expertly intertwined with also a beautiful world, right? It's very easy for puzzles in a game to kind of remove yourself, and they don't feel diegetic, they don't feel in the world, whereas with Jusant, everything feels so cohesive and whole that as you make this lonely trek up the mountain, you can't help but just kind of smile at its wonder. And that's a beautiful thing for a game to get right? Just to be able to be fully enveloped in the world, and I loved it for that. Number 4, Tears of the Kingdom just rules. Now, these top 4 could probably go any which way depending on how I'm feeling, but right now, this is the 4th. I had so much fun playing this game from moment 1 to hour 100 that when it ended, it just became this one resounding experience of player joy. And that is something I'll probably take with me for the next 10 years. That'll give me a smile maybe every month. Or maybe for the rest of my life. This game is such a joy to play, a joy to explore. Ultra hand, building, the player creativity of building your own things, getting lost in the depths, soaring above the skies. I don't have anything else cool to say about this game that has, it's fantastic. If you like being happy, you should play the new Zelda. Number 3, the first game I ever played by Larian was a little game called Divinity 2 Ego Draconis on the Xbox 360. Now, I used to have this scheme that we do, I think a lot of people did it, where in the summer, right, I had to use my lawn mowing money. Me and my friends would go to GameStop, we'd get a bunch of used games, we'd take them back within a week, make up some bullshit reason why we didn't like them, and get our money back. And we'd basically do that at different GameStops all summer, playing tons of games for free. It was awesome. Now, one of those days, I picked up Divinity 2 because it had a cool dragon-looking guy on the front, and that's how I chose my games back then. And this game's rough, people. It's not good, but it is kind of great because you could tell even at that early stage that Larian was up to something. They had a goal. Maybe they hadn't refined their skill set yet, but that's what's beautiful to see, right? And Baldurs Gate very much does not feel like something out of the blue for them, but a long, long refining process to get their masterpiece. And they hit it, right? The amount of character choice in this game is it's totally incomprehensible, right? It would take a team of over 100 people to create something like this, and there were moments, especially in Act 1, where the amount of density in the world was just gobstopping. At the end of the day, though, Baldur's Gate 3 is just a triumph, and if you like CRPGs, or if you like throwing barrels at people, you can't go wrong with it. Great job, Larry. Number 2. Resident Evil 4 at number 2. You might be thinking, why would you put a remake in number 2? Well, guess what? Resident Evil 4 is my first Resident Evil 4. I was only 5 when the original game came out, so this, to me, is just a brand new game, and it's maybe one of the best games ever made. I know people have been saying that for 2 decades, but now I get it. Now, I have gone back and played some of the original, and I like the remake more. Probably just recency bias. I don't know. Come on, knife parry. Knife parry! But yeah, this shit just rules, man. Just like, from start to finish. Just, there's not a beat that isn't just one of the coolest things you've ever seen, from the initial village to going through the church, all the swamps. Then you get to the castle and you're fighting spooky knights, and then it has a great boss battle against that little guy. I forget his name, the Duke dude. And then you go to the island, and it just, you're fighting all these unspeakable horrors. The regenerator fights are so cool. Oh, and then oh my god, and the Krauser fight. I could go on for days. Every point in this game, I was like, oh, I get it. This is why people love this game so much. And so, yeah, that's why Resident Evil 4 is number 2. Or number 1. These next 2 are interchangeable. Number 1. Mortal Kombat 1 is my number 1. And I get it. This game has tons of problems. But sometimes, these top 10 lists aren't about choosing the best game of the year. It's the game that you just liked the most. And Mortal Kombat 1 is a game I like so much. I like this game so much, in despite of all of its flaws, all of its weaknesses, all of its imbalancing, the problems with the netcode, the desynchronizations online, and yet it has me by the gills, okay? I mean, Sub-Zero is terrible in this game. I mean, he's actually a lot better in Season 3. But you know, compared to a lot of other characters, he's terrible. He's been my main since Mortal Kombat Deception. And still I'm having a blast. Now the big part of this being number one is I've been playing fighting games with my brother for basically my whole life. And the wonderful, beautiful, bitter rivalry we've had against each other with this game for months at this point is just like the top of like gaming fun. We hang out like once a week and just play so much Mortal Kombat and get happily, laughingly pissed at each other in a way that no game has kind of reached that height for me. It's just, you know, I love He's Smoke, I'm Sub-Zero, go at it every week, and I would like to do that for the rest of my life. And there's something about the look of this game mixed with how hard-hitting all the combos feel that it makes you want to get those 400 damage, 500 damage combos down because you just feel like such a badass. And that's what Mortal Kombat 1 does. It just inspires you to just want to kick people's ass in the most beautiful, beautiful way. And that's why it's number one. It's a good-ass time. So that's it. That's the top 10. That's what I liked. Maybe it'll change in like a month. I don't really know. But thanks for sticking around. We do this every year. It's always fun for me. You know, take a break from the dweedling and the doodling just to talk about some video games. So thanks for sticking around if you have. If you'd like more of this, let me know. I don't really know. This is more for me. Anyways. So thanks for sticking around and listening. As far as what's coming out next year, probably my two most anticipated releases are obviously Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, because I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, and I loved the remake. And then also Dragon's Dogma 2, which if you know me, you know Dragon's Dogma 1 is my favorite game of all time. And so the fact that this game's even being made at all feels like a miracle. And so yeah, that's that. Have a happy new year. Be good to yourself, be kind to yourself, and keep it going, okay? Rest easy. See you later.